Hello and welcome to The Breakdown. I am Tara Setmayer. This is the Rick Wilson, and we are with you tonight for another edition of The Breakdown. And we are officially 2 weeks. That's 2 weeks away from election night. I feel like we should do the Trump 2 weeks. Maybe that's when we'll finally get the Trump healthcare plan, infrastructure week, all the 2 week promises. That's all that we've got. 2 weeks left. That's what we've got. Oh my goodness. It's hard to imagine that it's right around the corner. But tonight we will have Mike Madrid of the Lincoln Project joining us. We'll have Sarah Rumpf joining us to talk Texas. And our special guests tonight will be Rachel Vindman, the wife of Lieutenant Colonel Alexander Vindman, who played a pivotal role in the impeachment hearings. You may have remembered his emotional testimony. And she's going to talk about what happened to them and what this administration did, as well as Fred Wellman, who is a Lincoln Project Veterans Advisor. So stay tuned for all of them. They'll be with us shortly. And as always, we would love to hear from you. So please tweet at us, hashtag #AskTheBreakdown, and we will take some of your questions. Also, we're going to go old school as always. You can leave us a voicemail message at 701-203-1208. And live callers will be back tomorrow night. So no live callers tonight. That is tomorrow. Rick, the desperation, you just feel it. It's building up. You can see it on Trump's face. You can see it and hear it in the way that Republican senators are talking. It is all crumbling around them. Our man-child in chief is throwing temper tantrums on Twitter again. He's going on his favorite shows on Fox and Friends and whining and complaining about this and that. He's now claiming that he wants 5 rallies a day between now and Election Day. Good luck with that. He's going back to 2016, trying to find old advisors to help give him a pep talk, tell him it's going to be all right. He's now trying to use the virus as an asset. He thinks that contracting COVID now somehow makes him this hero of the COVID crisis. Meanwhile, we're hitting records again. We've got, Scott Gottlieb, the former FDA commissioner, saying the next week and a half or so, we're going to see an absolute crush of infections. We're in a third wave. I mean, it is a disaster, an absolute disaster. And today, the president threw a hissy fit and walked out of his 60 Minutes interview with Leslie Stahl. So Joe Biden is also doing a 60 Minutes interview.
Dog.
That's right, like a dog. And if you saw the video of Trump,
dog.
He was walking across, leaving the White House, and he had some supporters out there, and it was just a walk of absolute defeat. You could see it on his face. It was right after he walked out and threw his temper tantrum with Leslie Stahl. It's really unbelievable. And on top of that, Rick, they're broke in campaign terms. They may have 200 million or so here and there.
In campaign terms.
Right. But they raised $1 billion freaking dollars, and they are whittled down to, I saw 68 million cash on hand, and it's 258 million with all of the other outside groups. That is terrible.
Now, that doesn't count the cost of the money. Right. It's horrifying. That doesn't count the cost of raising the money, which they've punted their bills until after the deadline, so they don't have to report how much they owe to their vendors. We talked about this a little bit last night. We got a piece of intelligence yesterday that one of the major digital ad placement companies in the country has rejected the Trump campaign as a client unless they're willing to pay cash up front for everything. Their credit is not, shall we say, sterling. But, the desperation, it is rising, Tara. The desperation is, the flop sweat coming off them is more evident. And the thing that's frustrating them the most is this entire Hunter Biden crap fest that they tried to put together has absolutely flopped. Even a lot of the conservative media is sort of walking away very quietly from it. Like, this seems concerning, but they're not covering it because they recognize what it is. It's a crude Rudy/Russia/ Trump campaign / Steve Bannon propaganda turd, and they can't polish it enough to make it an effective issue in this campaign. He's whining about the debate tomorrow night. He's sort of pre-gaming the debate by bitching about Kristen Welker, who's a great journalist. He's complaining like a crazy person about it. And I think what you've seen today and in the last 2 days really is this mounting sense inside the campaign and out that this is all off the rails now. You're seeing more Republicans breaking away from Trump. You're seeing more Republicans nervous about Trump. I spoke to a Republican congressman today who absolutely just unloaded on him to the point where he may go public on this thing. And it's not surprising to anyone now.
A sitting
Kevin McCarthy
Republican
knows that he's going to lose more House seats. Yes, a sitting Republican. Kevin McCarthy knows he's going to lose more House seats. Mitch McConnell is preparing for life in exile. And Republicans in the states, by the way, are also feeling the desperation. There are probably going to be 6 or 8 House seats in Florida that flip from R to D, a couple state Senate seats that flip from R to D. None of these things, and that iterates out across other states as well, none of these things is a good sign.
No.
There is a blue wave building. It is a meaningful blue wave. And Trump tonight on the campaign trail was going through one of his little routines saying, I would not have come to Erie, Pennsylvania until I was desperate.
Right.
Until I needed you. Will you please vote for me?
He literally
and
used
it's just so painful to watch.
Yeah, he's been talking more about
he's like the least happy warrior of all political history.
Yes, but he's a tough guy. He's a macho man. Let's check out what we've missed in meanwhile.
Let's see
the commission has changed the debate rules, so they're going to have basically a mute button.
Running from his past.
They stifled out my mic during my conversation with Crooked Hillary.
And dreading his future.
This commission, a lot of funny things go on with them.
Trapped like an animal.
These people are not good people.
Filled with fear.
The whole thing is crazy.
Filled with rage.
Kristen Welker is terrible.
Filled with lust.
I'll kiss the guys and the beautiful women.
One night, one dreaded night, hounding him, haunting him.
Mr. President, are you nervous about Thursday?
The debate, coming this Thursday.
I hope you folks like our old school stuff because you're going to keep getting it.
Yes, we like it. We figure, you have to have something different, a little flavor here and there, so that you don't just burst out in tears with the absolute insanity that goes on every day. So we try to mix it up for you a little bit. Let's bring in our first guest and talk a little bit of Texas. Sarah Rumpf is joining us, and she's a contributing editor at Mediaite. Make sure I properly introduce our friend Sarah Rumpf. And Mike Madrid, we all know Mike. We're here to talk state of the race in Texas, because I can't believe that there's actually Democratic money being spent in Texas.
And yet
here we are.
And yet here we are.
Mid-October, Texas is in play. Appreciate the invite, guys, too. Rick said, look, we're going to talk Texas. I'm like, let's talk Texas.
Yeah.
Saddle up. Let's get on. Let's do it.
Your favorite, Mike. You call it fool's gold, but here we are still talking Texas 2 weeks out.
You know what, though?
Well,
here's the biggest sign. I wrote that article about y'all spending money on ads in Texas. And you know how much pushback I got from my Texas friends? Nothing. When I moved there after the
and you know some right wingers out in Texas.
Well, I know people all across the political spectrum, people that work for the labor unions, people that work for the Democrats, Republicans, people that work for current Republican elected officials who are little birds in my ear. And when I moved there after the 2012 race, I have stuff. I have koozies and T-shirts that say "Keep Texas Red," and there was a group that rhymes with pop, Project Veritas, that was doing one of their little secret video things against Battleground Texas, and they gave up after a little bit because it was just a joke, and why bother with them? There's no hope. Greg Abbott beat Wendy Davis in 2014 with the women's vote and the Hispanics in the Rio Grande Valley. It was nothing. And then now I write this article and everyone just shrugs and they're like, well, yeah, maybe.
So, Sarah, I mean, the political culture of Texas has been so red for so long, and there's been such a belief that it can't change, it won't change. Mike and I, we've spent 9 months talking about Texas. Yeah. Like the numbers, we kept saying, forget it. No matter how good they look, we're not gonna touch it. It's fool's gold. We're not gonna touch it. We're not gonna touch it. And yet, at some point, the numbers. I mean, John Cornyn cannot get up above about 43, 44% in approval. Donald Trump, the Republican president of the United States, the incumbent Republican, can't clock 50% in that state, and it's just falling through the floor. It is an insane moment.
Well, what I saw is, again, when I moved there, what you would see is these vicious primaries with purity tests and who was the most pro-life and who had the pro-life endorsements from the right pro-life groups, and they would argue with each other over who loved babies more. And now you've got a situation where, you know, this whole thing about the Republican Party not being a big tent and being narrower and narrower and angrier under Trump, that is happening in a big way in Texas. You took the Republican Party, which was headed by a guy who was a friend of mine, who is a normal, sane person, and they've spent the last year having their county chairs get in trouble for posting racist, crazy conspiracy theories. Things like suggesting that George Floyd's death was faked. County Republican chairs posting this publicly on social media, and then having public fights where Governor Abbott and other statewide elected officials were demanding they resign. As far as I know, none of them resigned. When I wrote an article, there were 4 of them, and there were 2 or 3 more that happened in the next couple days. None of those people resigned, and instead the party had their convention and elected Alan West as their chairman. The guy who was a one-term congressman in Florida and then couldn't cut it because his district got redistricted and he wasn't willing to moderate. He walks around with a t-shirt that has a QAnon type slogan on it, and they've gotten even nuttier. So if you are a moderate, if you are a, Republican woman who's not really sure about Trump and you're looking at the Republican Party of Texas, you're seeing angry people, you're seeing people who are willing to put out racist conspiracy theories. One of the county chairs put out something comparing Martin Luther King Jr. to a monkey. It's insane. You've got the lieutenant governor saying that Dr. Fauci shouldn't be listened to, and we can just let this pandemic run, and old people should just be willing to sacrifice themselves so young people can have an economy. You just go down the list. There's no sane leadership that is not fighting with another faction of the conservative movement in Texas. The conservative activist groups are filing lawsuits against Governor Abbott over the different restrictions. Ken Paxton, the attorney general, has spent his whole term under indictment for securities fraud, alleged securities fraud. And he just got in trouble again. 7 of his top aides, his top assistants, wrote a public letter demanding an investigation, and Congressman Chip Roy, who used to be his assistant, publicly denounced him and demanded that he resign. So you've got all these Republicans fighting with each other. Sid Miller, who's the agriculture commissioner, is an absolute lunatic. Just Google his name and see the crazy stuff he's put out. I mean, there's who is
so
there?
Other than that, Mrs. Lincoln, how did you like the play?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, George P. Bush is the only sane, stable one out of the bunch that isn't fighting with everybody, but he's in a terrible position because to maintain his electability moving forward, he doesn't really want to rock the boat too bad. But as we all know, his entire family hates Trump, and none of them voted for him last time. So, I don't
endorse him.
And just a message to George P. God bless you. God bless you. But those people in the Trump world, they hate you for your last name. Yeah. They hate you for your demographic background. They hate you so much that sucking up to them will do no good whatsoever.
So
I mean, look,
true.
the same
but that's just,
people I see posting crazy Trump QAnon stuff on Facebook are the same ones that falsely claimed that George P. Bush wanted to sell the Alamo to the United Nations. So, and like knock it down. And they had all this crazy stuff. He spent a long time having to fight insane, sometimes racist, crap rumors online that he was going to tear down part of the Alamo. And instead, he got Phil Collins to donate millions of priceless Texas history artifacts. They renovated. I mean, there was part of the building that was like in real bad shape. They've done a lot of important repairs. I mean, again, but he's not going to get out there on the campaign trail. There's nobody who is sane, who can unify the party in Texas, who can get normal voters who are not already members of their local Republican Party to be out there. There just isn't anybody.
This is exactly why there's money being spent in Texas, right? This is why Democrats see an opening, because it's in absolute disarray. Texas hasn't gone blue for a president since 1976. So, Mike, is there going to be a bloodbath in the suburbs in Texas now? Worse?
Look, there's 3 reasons why Texas is moving the way that it is. The suburbs, of course, is front row and center. We've been talking about that as a Lincoln project since our inception. Rick's right. I mean, I remember conversations we were having back in May and June about whether or not this Texas dynamic was real, because the polling has shown that it's been a very competitive race since then. This is not a new dynamic. This is not a late breaking development. These numbers have been here since at least the late spring of this year. So many, many months. Every few weeks, I go back to Rick and say, Rick, Texas, and he says, Mike, Texas. And I say, we roll our eyes at each other and say, yeah, fool's gold. It can't really be happening. Wait till the next round of polling. It comes back and it's the same damn numbers. So after a while, you got to look in the rearview mirror and say, wait a second, this truck is coming. It's not going away. And that's why a couple of weeks ago, we made this commitment to go in, and we've done it pretty sizably. Now, keep in mind, we have been testing throughout. We have been spending real money in Texas to make sure if we ever did need to go in with that eventuality, we would be more than prepared, had the analytics, had the tests, knew geographically where we needed to go. You're right, Tara, the suburbs are not doing well at all for Donald Trump. That was the first line of collapse. 2 other dynamics I want to talk about really quickly. The first, of course, is this historic Hispanic vote that we're going to see. The Rio Grande Valley, a lot of rural parts of the state. One of the concerns that we have is that vote might be a little bit more Trumpy than we normally would expect. But with the enormous turnout we're going to get, you got to keep in mind, once the Latino vote gets bigger, even if it moves from 28 to 31%, the fact that it's 3% more of the electorate more than offsets this small break in the vote share first. Now, here's where I think Lincoln Project can have a real impact. We're going to start looking at what we call the deep MAGA counties. This is rural Texas where nobody else is at. We've known that Beto O'Rourke has been spending millions of dollars. Biden's just come in with a truckload of cash to the tune of about $6.87 million. Trump's out of money. Trump's out of cash. Lincoln Project's been there with a few $1 million already.
Democrats came in with 8 for MJ
Democrats come for $8 million. I mean, there is money being spent in Texas. This is a real thing. Where we may have the most impact is going into these really, really ruby red counties, picking off that 1 out of 25 Republicans who's a little bit hedging and saying, wait a second, maybe this country's not headed in the right direction. We're able to do that. Remember, 1 in 25, Bannon line numbers. We're already witnessing a deterioration of Republicans in Texas. You can't get to Biden +1, Biden +2 unless Republicans are already supporting the guy. We move 1 in 25 more Republican voters, and things start to look pretty interesting in Texas.
Just to explain what the Bannon numbers are for those who don't know, Steve Bannon, everyone knows who that is. He made a comment that if 4% of Republicans shifted away from Donald Trump, that it would be basically a landslide for Joe Biden. So we've been working in that space to go after that 4%. And so when Mike talks about that 1 in 25 in Texas, it's the same baseline, and that's all you need to move. So, and that was what we call the Lincoln Project effect. So we're happy to see that. Yeah. Trump was on Fox and Friends this morning. He called into his favorite pacifier show, and he had a couple things to say about Texas.
People are in love, and what you said about Texas, don't worry about Texas. Texas is with us. They want to take away your guns, your oil, and your God. Okay, that's what they want. They want to take away your Second Amendment. They want to take away fracking and oil. They don't care. They want to take it away. They want to go to the Green New Deal. That's not for Texas. Texas is not going to be losing their guns, and they're not going to be losing their oil, and they're not going to be losing their religion or their God.
They're coming for you.
He likes to have his binky in the morning. He needs his little pacifier every morning. God bless.
I love the fact that Fox News is asking Donald Trump, Republican president, about Texas 2 weeks before the race. Is it real or it's not? I mean, there's no bigger indicator of the red wall collapsing than both his travel schedule in the states that he is going to right now, and the questions he's getting asked on Fox News about, is what is really happening? Is this really falling apart? Are we really possibly going to lose Texas? Tells you everything you need to know.
It is as the country enters the last 2 weeks here, the swing states that were the swing states have moved out further and further. And, you know, Mike monitors these things like a hawk every day. And we're watching as Michigan and Wisconsin have moved out of reach. We watched as Iowa and Arizona have moved out of reach. We've watched as Trump's campaign is now centered basically on North Carolina, Florida, and Georgia.
And Wisconsin.
He's having to fight it out in Georgia. And the collapse is so broad, and the news is so bad because he's very unstable. It's displayed every day how unstable he has become. COVID is a roaring problem that is growing quickly again, and we have built this model from the beginning where COVID goes, Trump fails, and it's hurting him right now in ways that the denials over the spring and summer have come back to bite him on the ass. And so, and by the way, folks, speaking of COVID, I just want to say this: Mike and I are on set together, maskless tonight, as we are living in a COVID pod in our secret undisclosed location. Well, it's been disclosed now, but you know what I'm saying. We get tested all the time. We are members of the fraternity of having shit jammed up our noses every couple days to be tested for COVID. So we're in a very tight pod. Everyone in the studio is in the same pod. So we take COVID seriously. We encourage you to take COVID seriously. Wear your mask, wash your hands, socially distance. Don't kiss Donald Trump on the lips or anywhere else because he's like a petri dish of COVID. Anyway, Sarah's making such a face.
You know, that's funny. Speaking of that petri dish of COVID, so remember in Iowa last week where they had that big billboard that said "super spreader event this way"? That was you would see. So Trump, anyone that was going to the rally at the airport, they'd see this big billboard. Apparently, it is following him. They are putting up these billboards at rally locations. So that's awesome kudos to whoever's financing that, because that's awesome. One last question, Sarah. That's right. One last question to you, Sarah, about Texas. We've been hearing a lot about early voting and this mess out there in Harris County. What are you hearing on the ground with how early voting is going, and have there been any more blatant voter suppression tactics by Governor Abbott?
Okay, so part of the big problem, and again, I have to hand it to our elected officials here in Florida, where I am now. Absentee voting is a little harder to do in Texas. You have to have a reason, or you have to be over 65. So now in Governor Abbott's defense, the idea of having drop boxes was actually an expansion over previous election cycles. I checked with somebody in the governor's office a little bit ago after the story broke. That was an expansion. But the trouble is the pandemic changes every single calculation. I mean, just the arrangements that people are making these days to figure out who in their family is going to the grocery store, if someone in the household is immunocompromised, that's a big deal. So when they're putting these drop boxes out and then trying to make arrangements for them, people were really happy about that. And you think about, you've got two complicating factors. Some of these rural counties might not have many people, but they're so spread out. Are you going to drive 80 miles to drop off your ballot? And then in the big cities, if you're trying to make sure that you're being safe, and there's one place in the middle of the city, in the middle of downtown, and you're going to send your 85-year-old grandmother to go drive in downtown Houston and navigate and try to park. One of the things I thought was the most damning out of all of it, one of my friends in Austin posted a screenshot of the Google Maps outline of where some of the drop boxes were. And if you have any kind of mobility issues, if you're in a wheelchair, some of these drop boxes, I don't know that you could really get to. Now, most of the early voting locations, like most places, are in libraries and other places that are fully accessible. But if you're trying to make sure that you've got your ballot and it's getting turned in, that's a problem. So, I've been seeing all these reports of people waiting in lines for hours and hours and hours, and it just seems so insane to me. You shouldn't have to take 8, 9, 10 hours to vote. My vote took 30 seconds. I tweeted a picture turning in my absentee ballot. They had somebody at our county office sitting outside with a mask and hand sanitizer, watching the drop box all day long. It was a massive box. You couldn't have towed it away with a truck. And they had all the information. And she asked me to hold up the envelope and show that it was sealed and show that I had signed and dated it before I put it in the box, and asked if I had any questions. And it was great. I think we're just doing it better in Florida than Texas. It's just so much better run and so much faster.
Who the hell would have thought that?
I know.
That they're doing better in Florida.
I know we have a reputation of making elections a little interesting, but we're really trying, guys. We really are, I promise.
We're always ragging on your home state there,
Oh,
Rick Wilson.
man.
Oh my goodness. Well, Sarah Rumpf.
You know what? It is what it is.
Yeah, it is. We'll see what happens by election day. But Sarah Rumpf, thank you so much for joining us, and we're going to
Thanks for being on with us tonight, Sarah.
Thank
We'll see you soon.
We're going to leave you with a little Texas turnaround as we say goodbye to Sarah. Mike Madrid, do you have any last words before we segue on to our next guests for the evening?
Just real briefly, want to again thank you guys for letting me on, talking a little Texas. Look, this is competitive. If the money is there, we can kind of keep this going for the next couple of weeks.
Yep.
We're going to be pulling all the stops. We've got a great strategy. We've been looking at it for months. We're not the only ones. There's a whole crew of people here. We get Texas and turn it blue. It not only saves the country a lot of angst on election night as an early count state, but really it redefines Trumpism and the era of Trumpism within the Republican Party. So
And ends it.
and ends it completely. It just it breaks the spine of the serpent, and we're looking forward to it. So we'll be working hard. Appreciate everybody's support, and we'll talk soon.
Thank you, Mike.
Thanks, Rick.
Thank you, Mike.
See you, bud.
As they say, that's all, folks. On to our next segment. We have a new seg.
Here it comes.
It's coming. Well, in the meanwhile, we will bring in our next guest, which I am thrilled to talk to. Rachel Vindman is the wife of Alex Vindman, Lieutenant Colonel Alex Vindman, and he was the top Ukraine expert in the White House. And many folks know they watched his compelling testimony during the impeachment hearings last year, and he was present during that infamous phone call with Donald Trump and the Ukraine president, where he tried to shake down the Ukrainian president to investigate Joe Biden. Well, when Lieutenant Colonel Vindman testified, it turned into an absolute nightmare for his family. And Rachel, I want to welcome you and thank you for joining us here on The Breakdown.
Thank you for having me. It's nice to be here.
Thank you. And a little bit later, we're going to bring in
Hey,
Fred
Rachel,
Wellman,
how are you?
Hi, Rick.
our senior advisor for Veterans Affairs. Just so folks know, Fred Wellman's coming up too. Rachel, I just cannot believe what your family went through. And at the time when we were watching your husband's testimony, which was so powerful, I actually used his "Here Right Matters" in a speech recently. It still gives me chills when I say it. It brought me to tears in real time when I watched it, because what he was doing was an absolute act of patriotism. And I think he knew what was on the line when he did it, but he chose to do the right thing, and when so many others wouldn't. Can you talk a little bit about what it was like for you and your family once he made the decision to say, honey, this is what happened, this is what I heard, and I'm going to testify? Take it from there.
Well, as I've recently said, he told me one night before we were going to bed that there was a whistleblower. No idea, obviously, where it would go, but he asked me the next day to check on his professional liability insurance. So I had a lot of questions, and he just fell asleep. Then I stayed awake all night, and I Googled a little bit and read about the whistleblower complaint. There was not a lot, but there were some things about it. I'd heard about it, but I hadn't really dug into it. Then the next day, he really didn't say much more. The next day was a Friday, and the following week he took off. It was the UN General Assembly, and President Trump was meeting with President Zelensky. Alex was not allowed to attend. So I think that was a pretty big indicator. We started, kind of really buckling down and deciding what this meant. But I mean, he was very clear. He would testify if it came to that, and that was all there was to it. So I don't think I ever thought about what would happen to us if he didn't, because it was never an option.
And what happened after that? Trump was asked about it, and about your husband, and he said, "Oh, well, we'll see. There's some things that are going to happen," and I'm sure that was a surprise to you. What were some of the threats? Like, what did your family have to go through? Didn't you have to go into a secure location for a little while?
Yes. So basically, after a few days after, it seems like things were going pretty well. We had a lot of support. He testified on a Tuesday. We had Halloween. He went back to work on, I think, Thursday. There started to be some indications that, first off, there was lots of chatter on Twitter. All the talking points that were, made against him, that he was a traitor, that whole attack line really started to gain momentum and gain speed. And then that weekend, it really gained momentum to the president before he was getting on Marine One to go to New York. That's when he made the "we'll see" comment. And that was really scary. I know it sounds rather innocuous if you just hear it, but the context of it, of the most powerful man in the world saying "we'll see," and knowing how other people have been treated, and knowing just a tweet from the president or even from his sons about someone specific had been, had definitely been, it happened before. So there was definitely a reason for concern. And that's when we, started looking at our personal safety.
That is just remarkable.
I mean, you saw the hate machine up close, even when he started to do the elliptical things like "we'll see."
Yeah.
That sort of set off that cascade with the social media threats, the email, and everything else with you guys. You guys have both been through a lot. I've been privileged to know you and Alex now for a little while, and you guys have dedicated your lives and your family to the service of this country and to patriotism. And the story that you've gone through is sort of a microcosm of the way Trump is abusive to the military, the way he claims on the one hand to love them, but treats them with such contempt and such disrespect. Let's go ahead and roll the ad that Rachel just made. Rachel and Alex just made, but Rachel's the star. Let's not BS ourselves. Rachel's got the power here. She's the one on camera. So let's go ahead and roll that.
It was improper for the president to demand an investigation into a political opponent. It would undermine our Ukraine policy, and it would undermine our national security.
Lieutenant Colonel Vindman escorted out of his job and off the White House grounds.
Vindman complied with the House subpoena, told the truth as he saw it, and last week was fired from his National Security Council job, even being ignominiously escorted from the White House grounds.
As a decorated wounded war veteran and Purple Heart recipient, Lieutenant Colonel Vindman was asked to leave for telling the truth.
I'm not happy with him. You think I'm supposed to be happy with him? I'm not.
Lieutenant Colonel Vindman.
President Trump is sending a signal that the Pentagon should look into disciplining Vindman.
We sent him on his way to a much different location.
Dad, I'm sitting here today in the U.S. Capitol. You made the right decision 40 years ago to leave the Soviet Union and come here to the United States of America in search of a better life for our family. Do not worry.
The military can handle him any way they want.
I will be fine for telling the truth.
Well, that was the prior ad that we ran before Rachel did her star turn but it's still a damn good piece of the storytelling because it talks really about what happened to Alex in the meat grinder of the Trump world. Mm-hmm. And I'm going to bring in Fred Wellman now, who's our veterans advisor and my good friend. And you know, what I was saying just before we ran that spot, this contempt he has for service, you know, step aside from his political posturing.
Right.
This is the Rachel and Alex are a perfect example of just how dark this guy really is.
Right.
When it comes to these folks.
Well, it's in his DNA. I mean, let's be honest. Let's track back. Right. You know, it tracks back all the way back in the days. I'd like to point out that his I think 1994 prenuptial agreement with Marla Maples said that if Tiffany joined the military, that she wouldn't get her money anymore. Right. So this has been the way he's always been. He's always been really looking down on those who serve. He's thought they were losers. We've heard that in that story. I mean, this is just who Donald Trump is. And he tries to put the facade on and pretend. But in the end, those who have sacrificed their nation, just it doesn't add up to him. There's a psychological thing that service to the country, like they said in that one piece where he spoke to General Kelly at the grave of his son. I don't understand what was in it for him. And so, you know, what I think you see with Alex and Rachel was such a unique, and I was so privileged to get to know them both, is that this is a couple that represents our Army family so well. This is a couple who understands service to the nation. And you've learned through our work, and you've learned through Rachel's remarkable speaking out, and especially this last week, about what it is as a military family to serve. It's not just the soldier. It's a family that goes with you. And Rachel, the stories you've told me since I've known you, you know, about losing your father while you were overseas, losing your mother before you could say goodbye to her. That level of service, no one named Trump has ever experienced that.
No, not at all. Not at all.
Not only that, they look down on it. They frown upon it as suckers and losers. Sure, they have no idea what it means to sacrifice.
And that phrase of there's no money. What's in it for them? There's no money in it. Mm-hmm. I mean, that to me, well, this is also, I'm going to bridge out for 1 second. This is why, once again, John Kelly, if you want to give me a phone call, you have my number, as you know. You want to give me a phone call and you want to tell America the truth about Donald Trump, you could do a service to your country. You could restore some of the honor that you have sacrificed serving that man. You would be a knockout punch telling the truth about this president. Mm-hmm. So give me a call, John. You know you want to do the right thing. I know you're a good guy.
Yep. Admiral McRaven did it.
Meanwhile,
you can do it, you can.
Yep, he sure did. He sure did. Hey, so we actually have the Rachel spot queued up now. Guys, remember, LPTV is still a work in progress. We're doing our best here. We're professionalizing quickly, but there will still be some rough edges once in a while, especially with me involved. So let's play the spot that Rachel and Alex filmed, directed by, in part, their wonderful daughter.
That's right. Yeah, she has her own chair.
She has her own director's chair now. All right, let's go ahead and roll that.
There's one call no military spouse ever wants to get. And for me, that call came in October 2004 when I heard a voice telling me Alex had been injured by a roadside bomb.
The last time you saw me was here. Dad, do not worry. I will be fine for telling the truth.
The first time I felt threatened was just after Alex's testimony.
With Colonel Vindman, I'm not going to focus or comment on a former junior employee.
Well, I'm not happy with it. Well, you'll see. I mean, we'll see what happens.
The most powerful man in the world came after our family
But what happened to us can happen to anyone. We receive thousands of letters of support. America is so much better than Donald Trump. But he can cost this nation so much more with 4 more years.
This is America. This is the country I've served and defended. Here, right matters.
Vote Vets and the Lincoln Project are responsible for the content of this advertising.
It sends chills down my spine every time I hear him say that. It just did just now. I don't know. Maybe they do. How many Americans internalized that, what your husband said during that testimony, in the context in which he said it? The impact is incredible. And I know that there are millions of families, not just military families, that can relate to you, that see themselves in your family. But just as a suburban woman, as a suburban mom with a young daughter, looking at what Donald Trump has done, what he says, how he behaves, how do you think that impacts others? Have you heard from other families, other friends of yours, about how this whole thing has impacted them as well as suburban women looking at you and your circumstance?
So yeah, I think it's definitely had an impact. I think people, we're a military family, so we definitely have friends on the right. The military has typically, skewed right, and I grew up in Oklahoma, so I have a lot of friends and family that are Republican, but they know us, they know Alex, they know me, and they saw someone who was attacked, and it was difficult for them to reconcile. It's not reconcilable. It's not reconcilable with the current Republican administration and the Republican enablers who have allowed Trump to stay in power, without any censoring. They haven't censored him. They haven't censured him. They haven't done anything. They haven't. Legal resident, senior senator from Oklahoma, is the chairman of the House Armed Services Committee, and his office was awful. They laughed at me when
you can name names, Rachel.
Yeah,
so Senator Inhofe. Senator, everyone knows.
We'll
Senator
make him
Inhofe,
famous.
Yeah, he's pretty famous.
Yep.
He, so I never spoke to him. I will say that Senator Langford talked to me. He spoke to me. He called me. And I'll say that much about him, is he spoke to me. The only Republican who ever was nice to me was Liz Cheney. She stood up for Alex during this testimony when so people know that story. And I called her office that day because we were just sitting around with my friends waiting for Alex to be done. And I called her office, and then she called me back a few hours later personally. We had a nice conversation. And then later, people were berating her for calling me. Somehow it got released to the press, and I don't even know how that was found out. But I thought, we're such an upside down world. And then it just got even more so for us and our family. But it became to the point where it wasn't even Trump attacking us or his sons attacking us. It was Marsha Blackburn attacking us. It was, the White House sending out talking points during, before his testimony. The White House sent out talking points of how to attack him on Twitter the day of his testimony, and the attack lines. To know it's so organized from the White House was just, I couldn't believe it. After all of his service and after everything he had done, it was just such a slap in the face, and it still is. And so, sorry, I kind of got on a tangent, but in answer to your question,
No.
You've earned the right to say whatever you want.
Justified.
We're streaming,
Yeah, that's
Rachel.
great.
This is
That's
all
great.
you.
I have to say that I'm a redhead and I have light colored skin. And so when I get mad or, really emotional, my neck gets red, but don't worry, I'm not going to die or anything. But Alex can always tell when I'm mad. It's a nice litmus test. He knows when to stay away. So it's good. It's like an animal warning someone. But, I have heard from people, from friends of friends actually, who saw my CNN interview that was done with the amazing Breonna Keeler, who, and when the ad came out, and I suspect these are, the undecided voters who really are undecided, but are looking for a reason to not vote for Donald Trump. And they saw what I had to say, heard what I had to say. And I think it tipped the scales for a few people. And that's why I'm speaking out now, because it all matters. The 4%, the Bannon, it all matters. So all on the line. And, other military friends that I haven't talked to a lot through all this, I don't, that's the thing, is a lot of our friends didn't know what we were going through. What was I going to say? Put it on Facebook? How was I going to tell people what had happened to us? It sounded a little bit whiny. And even though they would understand, it didn't seem appropriate. But in the format of the ad and the interview, the piece that was in New York Magazine, I think it was a good way to say, this is who we are. You know who we are. And we're not, you put us in a lot of military members and even Republicans that put us in a box because they just wanted to ignore us and they wanted to believe the talking points. But when we put it in front of their faces and they had to actually see it and they had to listen to it, or maybe they didn't have to, but they did. And when they gave it a chance, they know the truth. Everyone knows the truth about who this man is. Some people are deluding themselves that it won't matter, but they know who he is.
Rachel, if you had one thing you could say to Donald Trump right now, what would it be?
Just stop and leave. We're done.
I think
stop, leave, we're done.
That's right. It's a great bumper sticker.
I guess the other thing I would say is,
right? Written that in. I screwed up on that one, Rachel. Sorry. Rachel, we should have talked more. Come on now.
The other,
I was texting Rachel as I drove cross country.
Yeah, it was. I know. Were you driving then, Fred? I was really concerned about that. I hope you weren't actually driving when you were texting. But there's voice text.
Hopefully, no one I know is watching this.
But I also would say to him, you picked the wrong family, because we're not going to back down. You might have thought that when he was on active duty, we did have to walk a line, and that was hard, but now we don't. And I don't think we're brave. I think we're just regular Americans who are fed up. We are just fed up. I drove by today a place that was they have a food distribution every Tuesday. Every week, the line gets longer, and it was half a mile long today. And we live in a place that's not as affected by this because of so many employees of the federal government. The lines are getting longer, the needs are more, and we continue. He says he's going to make things great, and the economy is great. The economy is not great for regular people, and they're not stupid. They know the economy is not great for them.
Rachel,
I'd like to go back and say I disagree with you about the bravery, Rachel. Sorry, Tara. You are very brave, and I think something we were talking about when you were doing while you were doing your interview with Breonna. I remember saying to a colleague there that it's a remarkable moment in American history that it's an act of bravery to speak out about the American president. That in our country, what we pride our freedom on, we fought for the ability to ask questions of our leadership. The First Amendment's been. The fact that you and your family took so much heat, and those of us who speak out get death threats, and you got mail, you got suspicious packages. It's a horrifying idea to me, especially as a soldier, that it's an act of bravery to speak out against the American president because of the threats, because of his followers, because of his enablers on, well, let's just say it, Fox News. I mean, the things that Laura Ingraham did. I mean, so I would disagree with you that you're not brave. You're incredibly brave. But I also would say it's incredibly heartbreakingly wrong that doing this is considered an act of bravery. But I think that's where we are. And that's why this has to end. This administration has to end.
Absolutely. Rick, before I let Rachel go, do you have one last thing you'd like to say?
Rachel, I just want you and Alex I want to encourage you guys to stay involved. You are a bright light, and you have fire in you that is just that just will not quit. And
hard to believe.
But your superpower is your badassery here. You have been very strong in this, and I love the times I've spent with you and Alex together that dynamic is just amazing. And you guys have done a great service to the country, not only for the last 20 plus years, but in the last year of showing people what integrity and unity and strength looks like. So thank you so much, Rachel, for being with us.
Thank you.
Best to Alex.
Yes.
And
Thank you.
and we'll talk to you again soon.
Okay,
Yes,
great.
thank
Thanks for
you.
having me on. It was a lot of fun.
Thanks,
All right.
Rachel.
Bye-bye.
We've got your 6.
Thank you.
Wow, what an amazing family. Fred, you're right. You know, if you hadn't
really
said it,
is.
I was going to. You know, the fact that she would think that what they're doing isn't brave, it is in the climate that we're in, and it's and we see this every single day.
Right.
Those of us who are part of the Lincoln Project, or who started off as the Never Trumpers, and what the cost has been to just do the right thing. It's unbelievable. It's unbelievable that what we're doing, that we're the ones that are considered the courageous ones. I mean, and here we have the Vindmans,
and
who are literally American patriots, who's put his life on the line, right? I mean, he's got a Purple Heart, for goodness sakes. Alexander Vindman is a hero, and this bastard of a president went out there and had the audacity to question his patriotism, to question whether he was a traitor, and then Fox News and their minions follow suit. How dare they? It was despicable. Go ahead, Fred.
You know, and really the final act too, Tara, was I really wanted to make sure we got the Kayleigh McEnany piece in there.
Yeah, junior
Because
employee.
It seems so small if you don't. Right. It seems so small to the average American. And one of my roles here at the Lincoln Project is to try and understand, get the average American to understand how these things impact the military, right? That how a veteran hears these things. Trump's lying to us, saying how much he does good things for us. Oh, I gave him pay raises and new equipment, which is all lies.
Right.
But it's those things that understand military culture. So when this young woman who is brand new White House press secretary, who came off of Fox News, her only qualification says nice things on TV, when she gets up at that podium with the United States of America and calls a serving United States Army officer with a Purple Heart, a combat tour, the pinnacle of his career serving in the National Security Council, to stand near that podium and call him a former junior employee. It was interesting to see the shockwave through the military community. I can't tell you how many of us changed our Twitter bio to former junior employee of the Army or whatever. That was mine for a little while ago. So I changed it to loser and sucker.
Yeah.
And so it's that, and every thought, Trump has just never gone into it. And he's surrounded himself with minions. He's surrounded himself with enablers who are just as freaking awful. I mean, just effing awful people.
Well, and one other thing, and you and I have talked about this, is Donald Trump loves guys like Eddie Gallagher, a Navy SEAL who committed war crimes, who murdered people under color of his uniform.
Clint Lawrence committed a war crime a day.
Yeah.
He was a lieutenant, he was a platoon leader for 3 days.
Yeah.
He was accused and convicted of 3 war crimes.
Yep.
And now he's out going to Trump rallies.
And he's a Trump surrogate now, and a Trump cheerleader.
Yeah.
And a guy like Alex Vindman,
he's a traitor,
who
in their mind
is targeted by the entire Trump media apparatus. It is a truly repulsive and low comment on this on Trump's character and on the people around him who would engage in those things.
That's right.
And I encourage all Trump appointees who've been involved in smearing decorated war veterans. You should seek employment in something that doesn't require you to have a public-facing role for the rest of your lives, because people are going to remember that behavior. They will remember it.
We're not forgetting. And the military community, this is why Trump's down in the polls with the military. A recent poll said it's a tie,
which is amazing,
with military family households.
Yeah.
And the thing is, a Republican incumbent should be a walk-off home run. Seriously, there shouldn't be a question of how much the military veteran vote is going to capture. And it says a lot about how much he's dismissed and undermined the culture of the military and the families. We've got families living in moldy housing. We've got $7.1 billion to a wall.
Right.
And so the kids at Fort Campbell's, their middle school didn't get built.
Right. And like you said, moldy housing and lead pipes and everything else for the military. They took the money for the wall. It was not Mexico, folks. It was out of the military construction budget and for MWR and for housing and everything else that would have cared for military families. That's where the money came to build that little stretch of wall.
40 miles.
And by the way, those folks in Texas,
and that's what I think where
those folks in Texas, John Cornyn brought up that, I didn't agree with that when he started to find religion again and claim certain things that he took issue with Donald Trump on. Well, there are some of the biggest bases in the country are in Texas. There's a huge military population there. And if you look at some of the states that shouldn't be in play, that are huge military populations, South Carolina, North Carolina, Georgia, and Texas, and Florida. It's don't think that those shifts don't matter, because they do. So Donald Trump here, that right matters. Let's take some of your voicemails. What have we got? What's up first?
Like what you guys are doing. Wondered if you're going to go after John Cornyn with all of his BS in Texas with MJ Hagar. Maybe give her a shot, or if it's even close enough to do it. Bye.
Somebody must have known what we were going to talk about tonight, Rick.
They were. The Democratic Senate Committee. The Democratic Senate Committee has come in with about 8.3 million for MJ Hagar. Other groups are coming in as well. We're taking a hard look at the Senate race there. It is still a fairly high hill to climb. She's made up a lot of ground. It's still a lot further apart than we'd like it to be. But I think Cornyn is his own worst enemy right now, being out there. Defending Donald Trump one day and crapping on him the next day. It's a bad look no matter how you slice it. Cornyn made a famous video. We got to dig it up in his last race. It's just like country and western song called Big John. And he's riding a little pony and he's got a little cowboy hat on. And, he's playing like this Western hero figure in it. And, he's a small man. He's more Little John than big. So
that's real.
We'll see how that shakes out. It's real. It's real. I'll get it for you. I'll send it to you.
Please,
it's crazy. It's crazy. I'll dig it up.
Before we take this,
and keep in mind he's running against MJ is a combat veteran.
Yeah, MJ.
Right.
Yeah,
they tried to go after her for her. My favorite part is the idiots tried to go after her for her tattoos. Why does she have an arm of tattoos, a sleeve?
Yeah,
it covers her wounds.
Covers her shrapnel wounds.
It's just
unbelievable.
Okay, so you're going after a combat wounded veteran because she covers up her wounds. Good call.
Yeah,
these guys are geniuses.
They really are. Just like white hot geniuses.
Yeah, they're all in the running. They're all in the running for the Nobel Peace Prize.
There's that.
Lynn 918-787-990.
How do you address the concern of lifelong Republicans?
Go ahead.
How do you address the concern of lifelong Republicans about potential tax hikes under a Democratic leadership? Well, here's the thing. Biden has argued, and I think correctly, that he's not going to raise taxes on anybody with a family income less than $400,000. The 2017 tax bill, look, I am a fiscal conservative. I'm also a guy who believes that lower taxes are generally a better thing. But I can tell you the 2017 tax bill that Donald Trump passed, that he takes so much credit for, I know the lobbyists who wrote it. I was on the phone with them when they were in Mitch McConnell's office writing the tax bill. And I asked one of them, I said, hey, is this thing going to have any middle class uplift? And he laughed and he goes, what the fuck do I care? He goes, my clients are the hedge fund industry. This bill is for 150 high net worth individuals and specific funds on Wall Street. That bill was not a tax bill that caused an economic uplift. All it did was buy us a huge amount of additional debt. There's a $2 trillion liability underneath it. It didn't have anywhere near the growth uplift they claimed it was going to have. So if Biden adjusts that to start rectifying our financial situation in some meaningful way, I suspect it's going to hit some folks who've been just fine, who've done just fine for a long time. And to broaden that tax question a little bit, again, as a fiscal conservative, I believe that we should have a regime of lower taxes. But to do that, we have to start eliminating the regulatory and tax loopholes that have been bought and paid for by lobbying in DC and all that crony capitalist shit that cruffs up the tax code and advantages people who can afford great lobbyists. That's not a liberal position. That's an extraordinarily conservative position. But that's just me. And I'm not a tax accountant. I don't play one on TV. But if the situation Biden has to get into to rescue the economy from this gigantic hole Donald Trump has put us in, and to turn things around, involve super high net worth individuals paying what they paid before the 2017 tax bill, so be it.
Yes, indeed. But you know what, though, Rick? Before I take the next voicemail, there are people that this is their main issue, which is why Donald Trump is still polling. The only area he's still polling well in is the economy. And a lot of business owners and folks who benefited from that tax cut are worried about, well, Biden's going to raise my taxes. We're in a bad enough shape now as it is. And what I would say to that is, and I get it, that's why we're not Democrats. We don't agree oftentimes with Democratic policy on taxes and fiscal policies. But in this instance, you have to remember that it was Biden and Obama that passed the stimulus, got us out of that Great Recession. Biden is not some crazy, let's tax everybody until to death liberal. He represents Delaware. Right, which has all the incorporated companies, and they understand business. Don't let Biden scare you to death. He's not AOC or any of those guys. So
he's not about to seize the means of production and establish workers collectives.
Exactly.
We're all
breathe.
So and none of that will matter.
It's not a good day unless I get called a socialist.
Right. Or a communist, Marxist, all some kind of this. It's not going to happen. Don't worry about it.
I had no idea.
All the ists.
We need to get out of this shitstorm first and save lives before we start worrying about what's going to happen to a tax cut. Because none of that will matter when people are dying in droves from a pandemic. So. Or if our democracy goes to hell.
Right.
So no tax cuts worth that.
We're going to lose that. I mean, when we talk taxes, we're not talking about a quarter. It's estimated that a fourth of all American small businesses aren't going to survive this pandemic.
That's right.
Mine didn't.
Yeah, that's real.
While we're dorking around, arguing about the tax, running a deficit, real Americans, we talk about Main Street all the time. Main Street is suffering. And so we've got to get our head out of our ass quickly and figure out what we need to do for actual Americans and not just a privileged few.
And Joe Biden actually cares about Main Street America. He has his entire public life. That's been his hallmark, sincerely. Unlike Donald Trump, who's just bullshitting and conning people. He could care less. He thinks you're disgusting and would never socialize with any of you if it wasn't for the election. So stop falling for it, Main Street America. Joe Biden's the guy who cares, not Trump. All right, what's up with our next voicemail?
Correct.
Hey, this is James calling from Wisconsin. Just got a quick question regarding if you think President George W. Bush will come out and verbally, publicly endorse a candidate. Thank you.
No.
You know what?
No.
You know what, Rick?
Stop hoping.
That was an easy one.
I know.
Stop hoping.
That was an easy one.
Stop hoping.
Yeah.
No, it's not going to happen.
I was on
Forget it. It's not
CNN.
gonna happen.
I was on CNN last week, or maybe a week and a half ago, talking about this when Michelle Obama came out, and it was announced that President Obama was going to go out on the trail in the final weeks to campaign for Biden, and I mentioned that night. I said, you know what would really be fantastic? If George W. Bush or Laura Bush or both of them together with the Obamas got together and talked about the importance of election integrity. They didn't have to necessarily say vote Joe Biden, but to show unity on the idea that we need to protect our election and that there should be a peaceful transition of power and the importance of voting. Something that was about saving the republic. I was hoping, wishful thinking, I guess, because we've seen stories come out because we're not the only ones asking. That caller is not the only one asking. A lot of people were looking to the Bushes, hoping that he would continue his statesman-like role and say something. But it's pretty clear that if they haven't said anything by now, they're not going to. And he thinks it's his role the more traditional role of not saying anything and getting involved as an ex-president. And I think that that's a missed opportunity.
W. I get it, but one 30-second ad from you, that's the ball game for a lot of people.
Come on over. The water's warm.
I get the same question. I get the same questions every day for General Mattis, General Kelly.
Mm-hmm.
They've all somehow refound their 4-star cloak of silence.
Right.
They took blatantly political positions in the administration.
Yeah.
And I tell people reach out to me all the time, especially Marines, because both gentlemen are Marines. Oh, they're going to save us. Like, no, they're not going to save us. What they're going to do, they're going to wait till after the election. They're both going to come out how they fought it quietly behind scenes and going to write books and speak at Aspen and Davos.
Mm-hmm.
and everyone's going to go, oh, thank you for saving us.
Yep.
And neither one of them is going to endanger their positions on boards or their positions in the icons. So
exactly.
I hate to say
it's
it.
too bad.
It's true, though.
Yeah.
But, all right, one more. What? Tweet Chick, you are our new favorite. That dog
like has... dog. That's bad.
Oh,
that's a badass dog.
That's awesome.
That dog will take your arm off.
That's pretty subtle. That's subtle.
Mess with that dog, you'll pull back a stump.
Yeah, well, Trump would know what that looks like.
I don't know. The dog's as good as the question.
No, I know. I'm just focusing on the dog at this
crazy.
point. You know, it's a great question.
Well, I think the question answers itself.
Scared.
Why was Trump such a whiny little puss today over 60 Minutes? Because he's a whiny little puss.
Whiny little puss.
Wow.
The end.
Here's your next tagline. I think it answers itself.
I think that's an ad.
think it does.
I think that's an ad, Rick.
Hashtag whiny little puss.
I can't wait to see the video of that. Fantastic.
One he can't grab.
We're keeping it classy here.
Oh yeah, it's only Tuesday.
I know.
Really already
fight
headed
it.
downhill fast. We haven't even started drinking.
You know, when I first joined, it's like I remember when I was tweeting first, like, man, can I cuss? Like, oh yeah. Not an issue.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. On that note, Fred, thank you so much for joining us. It has been an absolute pleasure. And also thank you to Rachel Vindman and to her husband in absentia for his courage and bravery. They're amazing. And to Sarah Rumpf for joining us tonight. And before we go, we have our call to action. What is it? It is about voter suppression. We are continuing to remind our viewers about the See Something, Say Something 2020 initiative, which is centered around reporting any voter shenanigans that you see out there at the polls. Say 2020 allows voters to report any instances of voter suppression that they observe, and they can mark the time and the location, and Democracy Labs will check it out and check out the report and see if it's any voter intimidation or suppression and whether it should be investigated. So we hope that you don't ever need it, but in case you do, it's csay2020.com. And make sure you please continue to vote. We're over 36 million people voting. That is 25% of the entire vote total in 2016 already, with 2 weeks to go. Keep it up, folks. Keep it up. Rick?
Well, Tara, I just wanted to say thanks again to Rachel Vindman, Sarah Rumpf, Fred Wellman, and Mike Madrid tonight for joining us. We've got a great panel coming up tomorrow night of election lawyers who will answer all your super complicated election law questions, because they're both frightening and frightened. And I just want to say, folks, I can't give you the hard numbers right now, but I want to encourage you to keep voting, because I just saw polling as we're speaking in Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, and Michigan. And the early voting that you guys are doing is kicking Donald Trump's ass. Keep it up. Keep it up.
It's glorious.
And with that, I also want to encourage folks to tune in during the day to our sister show, Vote for America, with Jennifer Horn and Lisa Seneschal. It airs at 2:30 p.m. Eastern every weekday on the Lincoln YouTube channel. So we're going to be back with you tomorrow night. Tune in, Vote for America tomorrow, and
yes,
and there we go.
Yeah, one last
another successful evening in the bag.
I know we have one more thing. Wait, there's
we do have one more thing.
Yes, there's more. Our friend,
we do have. This was a big thing.
Yes, this is a very big thing.
This is a big thing.
So my very good friend, who I've known for 2 decades, former RNC chairman Michael Steele. He is a senior advisor to the Lincoln Project. He has come out and officially endorsed Joe Biden. And Rick and the crew worked with him to put out this outstanding ad about why he's doing what he's doing. So as we leave you, let's roll the Michael Steele ad, and we will see you all tomorrow. Good night from The Breakdown.
Imagine that night. Tensions high. A nation torn apart. A plot here in Baltimore City to assassinate a newly elected president on his way to inauguration and to plunge the country into chaos. Abraham Lincoln disembarked at this train station and under pre-dawn skies made his way unscathed and on to greatness. In the days ahead, we may face a crisis of similar proportion, an outlaw president clinging to power and defying the will of the people. For 4 years, many have said there will come a moment. Well, this is the moment. Because this ballot is like none ever cast. Now, I'm a lifelong Republican, and I'm still a Republican. But this ballot is how we restore the soul of our nation, electing a good man, Joe Biden, and a trailblazer, Kamala Harris, and ensure an orderly transfer of power. Or plunge our country into chaos. America or Trump? I choose America.
The Lincoln Project is responsible for the content of this advertisement.
Hey guys, hope you're doing well. Just watching my algorithms get crushed. I guess I did something to piss off the Instagram gods, so hopefully you're seeing this stuff anyway. We'll do what we can. Talk to you soon.